Welcome to the December meeting of the nonprofit Plant-Based Nutrition Organization of Wisconsin. I'm your host, Terry Lynch. The mission of our nonprofit group is to educate, inspire, and support each other on an evidence-backed whole food plant-based nutritional path for health and improved quality of life. Our group is open to everyone, those plant-based and those just curious about it. It's meant to be a non-judgmental place for people to come, get information, and inspiration and support. If you'd like more information about our group, our upcoming meeting dates, speakers and other events, resources, you can go to our website, which is pbnow.org or pbnow.org, or find us on Facebook or Instagram. And as we do each time, can I see a show of hands, either by raising your hand or using the thumbs up icon on the Zoom page to see how many of you are currently following a plant-based lifestyle? That's a good number. I'd say it's about a third of the group. Excellent. As we also mentioned in each meeting, the evidence of the benefits for plant-based nutrition and improving health and quality of life for people of all ages is, as published in non-biased medical research, is quite striking. Whether it's improving health through increased energy, weight loss, preventing, slowing, stopping, or reversing problems like allergies, digestive problems, diabetes, heart disease, and early dementia, or increasing our quality of life by helping us feel better quickly, strengthening our immune system, increasing our endurance, improving athletic performance, speeding recovery from exercise, reducing joint pain, clearing our thinking, or reducing the physical, emotional, and financial side effects of the illnesses, drugs, and procedures that are often recommended to treat the conditions plant-based nutrition can help us avoid. The research shows that our bodies do a wonderful job of healing themselves if we stop damaging them daily with poor nutrition and start giving them the nutrition they need to heal and function as optimally as possible. It really is remarkable. Now, let me tell you what's in store for you tonight. Tonight, you'll hear from three speakers. Our first speaker will be our PBNOW Medical Director, Dr. Joshua Liberman. After Dr. Liberman's comments, we'll hear some plant-based holiday tips from cook Amberly Childs. And after Amberly, we'll hear from our featured speaker, dietitian and nutritionist, Karen Smith. We should have about 15 to 20 minutes left at the end for question and answers after Karen's talk, and the program should end right at 7:30. As a reminder, we have meetings usually on the second Thursday of each month at 6 p.m. Central Time. Once again, you can find out more information about our upcoming meetings on our website, pbnow.org. And a quick technical note, during the meeting, everyone but the speakers will be muted. We'd ask you to stay that way so we can avoid background noise, so everybody has a chance to hear the speaker as clearly as possible. And I guess I'd also mention too, for those who are unfamiliar with Zoom, you can go up to the view area. It's usually in the upper right-hand corner, and hit speaker view if you want. Then when the speaker starts speaking, they will take up most of the space on the screen. So with that, let's get to our first speaker tonight. And that's our PBNOW Medical Director. He is fellowship-trained cardiologist, practicing cardiology at Ascension Columbia St. Mary's here in Milwaukee. He is past president and current trustee of the Wisconsin chapter of the American College of Cardiology, and he's a member of the American College of Cardiology's National Prevention Work Group, whose membership includes nationally known physicians such as Dr. Dean Ornish, Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn, and Dr. Neil Barnard. He's an advocate for the use of plant-based nutrition to help improve health, heart health, general health, and quality of life, and has seen the benefits of plant-based nutrition both in his personal life and that of his family and patients. We are fortunate to have him practicing here in Milwaukee and as our PBNOW Medical Director. I'm happy to welcome Dr. Joshua Liberman. Dr. Liberman.
Great. Thanks, Terry. How's everybody doing today? Good, fantastic. All right, so Welcome. As Terry said, we appreciate you being here, in our nice community-based group, non-judgmental, just for, information, educational purposes, and for, mutual encouragement. So as Terry said, I'm Joshua Liberman. I'm one of the cardiologists here in downtown Milwaukee. And, as many of you know, what I like to do is talk about some experiences, from my personal practice, as well as, just a quick tidbit from the literature, just to talk about, healthy lifestyles in general. And I think that's maybe a good place to start. We've talked about this a little bit in the past at an earlier meeting. But even if you're eating a plant-based diet, you can still kind of go off the rails a little bit. We talked about this, how, potato chips can technically be, plant-based if they're cooked in vegetable oil, but they're not necessarily healthy. And one of the other things, and I believe I mentioned this before, one of the other things that we have to, be careful of with a plant-based diet is sodium or salt intake. Now, if you're eating a whole foods, natural, plant-based diet with, very few processed foods or no processed foods, you're probably fine, and you don't really, have to worry. But, I get a lot of comments even from, patients even today. Actually, there were two today that talked about this, that were asking about, when I started talking to them about plant-based diets, they said, well, what about the Impossible Burger or Beyond Meat or these kinds of things? Are they reasonable for me to be eating? And, not to go off too much off the topic, but my typical response is that these things are healthier, but not necessarily healthy. And the sodium load in especially like, Impossible Burgers and these kinds of things is fairly high. And so you can eat a vegan or plant-based diet and still be taking in a lot of sodium if you're depending on a lot of the, the kind of the fake meat products, the smart ground or the tofu sausages or things like this. And, many of you may not be doing that. Many of you are may be doing that. And, again, I'm certainly not trying to disparage or criticize or be judgmental, but I think you do have to be aware of the sodium intake. And one of this is brought to mind because I was just, there was a study that came out a couple months ago, but I just came across a commentary on it again recently, and I thought it might be nice to talk about. But there was a study that looked at the effects of what would really happen if you decrease the sodium in your diet, and they were actually focusing on really just a kind of a minimal decrease of sodium. And so what this study was a study based in China. They actually went to 600 villages in China. I mean, think about that number. I mean, that's a crazy number. But 600 rural villages in China, and they basically paired them up, into twos. And one of the pairs was just allowed to just, kind of do whatever they wanted, use the regular sodium in their diets, the regular salt in their diets. The other member of the pair, though, all the houses in that village were given salt shakers, basically, but it wasn't, instead of salt, it was a salt substitute that was 75% sodium and 25% potassium chloride. So it was 75% sodium chloride and 25% potassium chloride. Now, just for reference, like, some of you may be aware of Mrs. Dash as a salt substitute. Mrs. Dash, you can buy it in any supermarket. Mrs. Dash is pure potassium chloride, right? So it's not sodium chloride, it's potassium chloride. And as a result, we tend to believe it's, it's safe and actually, likely beneficial for human health. The problem is it just doesn't quite taste like salt, and a lot of people don't like using Mrs. Dash. But so this is why this group of investigators specifically used something that was lower in sodium, but not zero sodium. And so just a 25% reduction in sodium, and they were given, boxes of this salt substitute, and they were just tracked for half a year. And again, 20,000 people were tracked in this trial, 600 rural villages in China. And sure enough, what did they find? Is that the group who had the 75% salt substitute, the 25% reduction or the 25% replacement with potassium, had about a 16% reduction in strokes, right? It's a very robust, now maybe 16% doesn't sound a lot to you guys, but all we're doing is reducing their sodium by a little amount. They're still eating a lot of sodium. We're not changing anything else in their lives. We didn't tell them to start exercising. We didn't tell them to move to a plant-based diet. We didn't do anything else. All we did was swiped out the sodium out of their cupboards and replaced it with something that was just a little bit less sodium. And he had a 16% reduction in strokes. So this was published in the New England Journal of Medicine, which is, probably the worldwide prominent journal, because it really, it shows how profound the impact of salt is in our lives. And again, many of the people on this phone call really don't have to worry because you're eating a whole foods plant-based diet that's got minimal processed foods, and things are mostly in their natural form. In which case, yeah, there's some elemental sodium in the stuff, but certainly you don't have to worry about reducing that. But some of you on this call would still be, not as careful with sodium as they want to be. I don't know if you need to, Mr. Silver, you might want to mute. Yeah. The impact of sodium, is pretty powerful. So if you are not really paying attention, it might be a good thing to start doing. Again, I'm not saying you have to completely eliminate it from your diet if the rest of your diet is overall quite healthy. But certainly if you have high blood pressure, it's a very, very powerful thing to do to bring down your blood pressure and get yourself overall healthy. In terms of the kind of the patient vignette or the patient story from my practice, again, every day I'm seeing people that are either, starting their journey or well on their way in their journey on getting themselves healthier, certainly by, utilizing a plant-based diet. One of the patients, actually, the second to last patient I saw today was an 85-year-old man who had bypass surgery, about 10 or more years ago, and a couple of years ago was having some more pain, and we ended up doing a heart catheterization. We found out that that he still had some disease in his blood vessel, but it was unfortunately it was after the point where the bypass came in. So it's like if there was a traffic jam on the highway and you get off on a side street, which is what the bypass graft is, but instead of waiting until you get past traffic, you take the next exit and you're right back in the middle of traffic, right? And so you didn't really save yourself that much. That's what this guy's situation was, is that he still had some disease, and it was in a place where the bypass graft had not bypassed. And so unfortunately, because of his age and because of the size of the blood vessel and some other things, we thought it wasn't really safe or appropriate to do significant intervention or try to put a stent in or anything. And so we talked about other ways that we could try to, get him to feel better, get him to, to get free of pain and get him healthier. And certainly one of the things we talked about was moving to a plant-based diet. And sure enough, he has moved to a plant-based diet, and he's feeling much better now. But the point is not so much that plant-based diets get you healthier. I mean, again, we talk about that every single time in this, every month. But more the point was, guy's 85 years old, right? For the vast majority of his life, he did not eat this way. He ate just a typical American diet, right? And yet even, at age 82, 83, he was able to make a change, right? And so I think it tells you, again, give your friends, give your family, give your patients, if you're a provider, give them a chance, right? Lead by example, talk about the benefits, show the benefits in your own life, but again, I think it's just important that there's nobody, there's nobody who's too old or too young or too far gone or too this or too that, who can't benefit from moving to improve their nutrition, through this kind of pattern of eating. And again, I just give a credit to this guy. I mean, late in his life, it's hard to teach an old dog new tricks, as they say, but he was able to do it. So that's my patient vignette for the day. And I know that there was just there's a bunch of chat comments already that I guess I want to just address if I can. One of the questions is a question I get, honestly, I feel like on a daily basis, which is what about sea salt or Himalayan pink salt or it's still salt. So sea salt and seasoned salt and onion salt and garlic salt and all these things, they have additional flavoring. Sea salt just has additional minerals because it comes from the sea. Himalayan pink salt, again, has additional minerals that give it different flavor, but has the exact same sodium content as regular table salt or kosher salt or iodized salt or coarse salt or any of these kinds of things. So sea salt is not a safer healthier version of salt. It's just a tastier version. And so maybe you could get by with using less, in which case, sure, maybe that would be healthier, but it is not a safer or healthier salt. And that's a common misconception. There was a survey that actually said about 50% of people out there thought that sea salt was safer. Another question was just how much is safe. You know, the recommendation for any basically is to be under 2,000 milligrams. So if you have health problems, if you have diabetes or high blood pressure, heart disease or stroke or any of these kinds of things, it's actually recommended to be under 1,500. If you don't have any of those things and you're otherwise healthy, it's recommended to be under 2,300. But 2,000 is a nice round number to be aware of. There's a lot of health benefits that can accrue if you get down to those levels. It's really hard to do. On average in this country, we take in about 4,000 milligrams of sodium. So that's average, right? So that means that half the people are taking in more than that and half are taking less, but 4,000 milligrams. If you go to a restaurant, and again, maybe some of you don't go to restaurants because of your dietary patterns, but there are vegan restaurants, in almost every city now. And just be aware, restaurants will pack their food with salt. And then, I guess the other question was just if you don't have a high blood pressure problem, do you have to worry about sodium? Honestly, probably not. If your blood pressure is naturally low and you don't have high blood pressure tendencies, you don't have to be as strict with it, but it's still probably not reasonable to go overboard. That's about it, I think. So Terry, back to you.
Thanks, Josh. Outstanding. And I see a note in here that Donna mentioned that she's 83 and just made the change herself. So it's not too late.
Exactly. It's great to hear.
Outstanding. So our next speaker is Plant-Based Cook, familiar to many of you. She's the founder and operator of the Milwaukee company Plant Joy, through which she teaches plant-based cooking classes and offers an ever-expanding menu of home-delivered plant meals, providing an easy way for people to incorporate plant-based nutrition into their daily lives. You can find out more specific information about her and Plant Joy at plantjoy.net. She was trained and certified as a plant-based cooking instructor in the Food for Life program run by Dr. Bernard's Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine in Washington, D.C. There are a number of Food for Life certified instructors in the country, but many areas of the country don't have the luxury of having one nearby. We not only have one here in Milwaukee, but she is excellent. To share with us some holiday tips and update us on upcoming plant-based cooking classes is plant-based cook and cooking instructor Amberly Childs. Amberly?
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much. Excuse me. It's good to be back. Nice to see everybody. I see some people from far away. I see some people who just had babies. So it's really exciting to see everybody kind of convening together. So I don't want to take too much time tonight because I'm really excited for our speaker, and I'm sure all of you are, and I'm sure we want to leave lots of time for Q&A. So I'm just going to kind of jump into some of the, we just had a holiday. We have a couple holidays coming. And so I just wanted to talk a little bit about, what to eat during that holiday. Most of us are plant-based or working toward plant-based, and the holidays can be very stressful. I just went to Georgia and spent Thanksgiving there with my family, and none of them are plant-based. And, my mom's, that person who always sends me, I sent you a recipe, and, it's like a chicken stir fry or something. And I'm like, she still just doesn't really there's that little piece that she's kind of missing. Right. But I'm like, thanks, Mom, and anyways, so, I feel like we all probably have that person kind of in our circle already. And the holidays can make it very stressful. So I'll just give you a short little testimony of kind of what I did this holiday that I thought worked really well. So one, I knew going into it that my husband, myself, and my daughter were going to be the only plant-based eaters. So I mailed snacks, food, things that I knew that my daughter specifically liked, that, nutritional yeast, she eats that on pasta. We weren't going to find that in rural Georgia. So I made sure that there were some specialty items that were staples in our kitchen that I mailed ahead so we could have those. You might not have a 2.5-year-old, so you might not have to do some of those things, but I was concerned, like, could I find soy milk that didn't have sugar loaded in it? And so I think doing a little homework where you're going, preparing. I was able to mail things. And then when I got there, instead of sitting in the back seat and saying, being a judge of everything that was going to be put on the table, and I was there for a week, I decided to get in the kitchen and I decided to woo everyone with what plant-based cooking tasted like. And my nephews, who are 11 and 13, were like, oh my gosh, this is fantastic. Well, it was a simple red sauce that I made, and it was pasta. And so I wasn't really going out of the ordinary on things I was cooking, but I was trying to do more simplistic things that were really tasty. And so one, I could show my younger sister, had to throw that in, right? I could show my sister that there could be really good food that came from not a lot of effort, but you just had to kind of know what are some staples and go to in your house. And then two, I was able to introduce my nephews to really healthy, good food. And you know, day two, it was, is Auntie Anne making her happy cakes again, which are plant-based pancakes, which are just oatmeal and gluten-free flour, you know, and so what is this recipe? And I'm like, it's nothing major. So I took an opportunity, because I've spent the last 11 years of my life being plant-based and being really frustrated at holidays. So this year I tried to change things a little bit. And instead of talking about what I was doing, I decided to show people what I was doing. And so maybe you're not going to be in a kitchen where you can cook. Maybe you're a guest at someone's home. And so in that situation, bring a dish, bring 2 dishes. Bring your favorite dish, and don't make just 1 or 2 helpings of it. Make a lot, because I tell you, every time I bring a yummy plant-based dish to a gathering where more than myself and my family are eating, people are curious, and therefore they're going to taste it, and then they're going to like it, and then they're going to eat more of it. And you're going to be the person who leaves with an empty platter. And so I can say from experience, this holiday at Thanksgiving, you know, we still had all the accoutrements. My family wanted to have their animal out there, but I made sure that all the side dishes were plant-based, and that even though we were still eating a sweet potato casserole, that we had some say in the ingredients that went in there. And I tell you, my nephews, my sister, everyone who dined with us was pleasantly surprised at how they didn't miss anything. And so I encourage you, as you embark on holidays, or whether it's a holiday gathering with friends who might not be plant-based, who are just maybe plant curious, bring something. If you don't want to cook it, buy something, bring it. But encourage people that plant-based food can be yummy. In addition, like the whole health aspect, that's why we're all doing this, right? We want to help our bodies, we want to help the environment, the animals, all of those things, but we really want food to taste good and yummy. So encourage people to try some new food, and I guarantee you're going to engage in dialogue after that engagement. And my engagement, how it worked out for me was my sister, well, I don't want to be too judgmental, but we were shopping, and she wanted to, and I love her dearly, wanted to buy, oh my gosh, what are those little snackables, which is the little fake meat, you know, the meats and the cheeses. And I couldn't even contain myself. Like, I'm like, my lip is curling. I'm like, don't be judgmental. And I'm trying to like walk away with the grocery cart. And she, being my sister, is like, what's up? Your energy just totally changed. And I'm like, it's all good. It's all good. Let's just keep going. What's next on the list? And she's like, what is it you want to say? And I'm like, I don't want to say anything. It was our first night together. And then finally she said, no, I really want to know, what is it you're thinking? And she said, I can see it's bothering you. And I said, I just would rather you not buy those for the boys. And if you would want to talk about why I feel that way, I would love to have a discussion with you. But I don't think you want to have that discussion. So that's why I decided to just be quiet. And that one, of course, I'm nervous and my heart's beating terribly. And a week later, when the vacation was over, she messaged me and said, you inspire me. Thank you so much for sharing your talents with us and all the yummy food. My boys have been asking for happy cakes. I've been making all of the meals that you made for us. And then I sent her PCRMs, the 21-day Kickstart app. And she was like, I downloaded it already. And so, you know, there are resources right at our fingertips for those people who are like plant curious. Or so as you embark on people this holiday season who are like, what are you doing? You know, try not to be judgmental of what they're doing, but maybe share a little of what you're doing and the great things that it's bringing to your life. And maybe they'll be curious enough to ask more questions, to look up a book, to get on a group call like this, and to maybe embark onto a somewhat of a healthier journey. So there's my story. I'm going to leave you all with that. We have a couple of great cooking classes that are going to be coming up in the new year that I've got booked. I have a little froggy. They're through the West Dallas Recreation Department. So if you're in West Dallas, they're a little bit of a reduced price for you. But in January 27th, Thursday, I love Thursdays, we're doing a Kickstart cooking class. And February 24th, we're doing a women's health, food and hormones class. Really excited. This is a new curriculum that I'm bringing forward to the area. And I'm really excited. That's going to be an evening class. And then in March, I'm doing a cancer class. So we're going to be doing really just jumping into it in the beginning of the year and really going to talk about some of those difficult illnesses that we all have known someone who suffered from, me specifically having cancer. And we're going to dive into those. So if you're interested in any more information, you can find it on my website. All of the cooking classes are listed there at plantjoy.net. I'm going to look over to the chat and see if anybody had any questions or comments.
I do notice that there's a request for your Happy Cakes recipe.
Okay, I can do that. How about I share it with Terry? I have to go downstairs and get it. You know, it's like written on like some scratch paper or whatnot. But it's really simple. I just use a gluten-free pancake mix that does not have eggs in it. And I'm even learning to make my own gluten-free pancake mix, like rice flour, brown rice flour. So don't be afraid to Google that as well, because gluten-free pancake mix can be very expensive. But then I do a 2:1, and the 1 is I add in ground oatmeal to make it a little bit more fibrous and get some, and then I leave it kind of chunky. I do mashed up bananas. I use no oil, and I replace the oil with applesauce. And then I add in a little vanilla and a little bit of either, you know, nutmeg or cinnamon, depending on kind of what season it is. And then whatever your dairy milk or non-dairy milk of choice would be, you want to add that in, mix it up. And I use a griddle right on my stovetop. And literally my daughter started calling them happy cakes. One day she was like, happy cakes? And we were like, so every Saturday we just make a jumbo batch of these, and she eats one a day. Like, she so loves them. And so now we call them happy cakes, but I would be happy to share the recipe with you all. So
that's great, Amberly. And as a matter of fact, if you do find it on a card or something like that, you can bring it up and we could bring your screen up and people could take a picture with their phone.
Yeah, but I don't have it electronic. It's like in my kitchen, like written on.
Oh, I mean, if you could hold it up to the camera, and people could take a picture of it. But
yeah, that's not going to happen right now.
All right, gotcha. Just
sorry.
Coming up with an idea.
If I go downstairs and see my daughter, I'm not coming back up here. She's not going to let me go.
I love the happy cake.
But I will,
Too much.
once I'm off, let me see what I can do, and I'll turn the screen off
Sure.
and see. Yeah. But if not, I will then email it or to Terry, and I'll make sure that everyone gets it. Okay.
All right. Oh, that's great. Thanks. What a great experience this year, Emily. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, thank you. And you know what? I'll leave you guys with this. It's been 11 years that I've been plant-based and on my journey, and I've been so nervous, and like, you know, my mom's got a lot of health issues, and people are just very, in my family, not receptive to the plant-based message. And so I've just learned to kind of take the back seat and say, hey, I don't want to talk. I don't want to push. If they want to know, they know where to find me. And it's been a long time. It's been a decade and no one's really coming knocking. So when my sister we had this great discussion, I was just, wow, it really was mind blowing for me. So don't give up on your people, because you never know when someone's going to have an illness, an episode. And, we all have information. And if you don't feel comfortable being the person to tell them all that info, connect them to to PCRM, to
Right.
tons of free data out there. So thank you all so much. Have a wonderful evening, and we'll looking forward to our next speaker.
That sounds great. Thanks, Emily. And I'm going to add something here just before I introduce our next speaker. And this again is in the 80-year category. The new mayor of New York, Eric Adams, is plant-based. And I have a quote from him about his mother. He said, "My mother joined me in eating plant-based at 80 years old, 15 years as a diabetic, 7 years on insulin. After 2 months on a whole food plant-based diet, she threw her insulin away." Now that's not going to happen with everybody. And I'm sure Karen has experienced, our speaker coming up here, who has done a bunch of diabetes work, has run into people who've been diabetics who have gone plant-based. And, it's going to be, you need medical supervision to make sure that you're doing it the right way. And you may not have the results that Eric Adams' mother had, but his mother had pretty dramatic results at 80 years old. So it's just remarkable. That being said, let me introduce our next speaker. Our featured speaker tonight is a registered dietitian and certified diabetes care and education specialist with the Washington, D.C. based Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. With more than 16 years of experience working as a dietitian, she understands the challenges individuals face in making dietary changes and enjoys helping them find strategies to make eating healthy, easy, and delicious. She especially loves helping families cook and eat healthy plant-based meals together. She is an avid runner and placed in the top 1% of women finishers at the 2015 and 2016 Boston Marathons. She is also a mother of 3 and is proud of the healthy eating habits her children, husband, and others in her family have adopted, and the health benefits they've experienced as a result. I'm happy to welcome our featured speaker tonight, nutritionist Karen Smith. Karen?
Thanks, Terry. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for inviting me to join you this evening. Yeah, it's just great to be here. I'm calling in from Abingdon, Maryland. Not sure if anyone knows where that is, but a small town a little bit north of Baltimore. And yeah, it's just a pleasure. So the topic that Terry and I thought would be fun to discuss, and Terry, you came up with the title, "Are Plants Enough?" I love it. And it would never be a PCRM talk, or like I always have to have slides. That's just like what we do. So I'll share my screen with you. But as Terry said, I've been a dietitian for about 16 years. And if you had asked me this question can everyone see my screen okay? Cool.
Yep.
If you had asked me this question at the beginning of my career, I would have said, no way. They're not. And it was only about 8 years ago that I discovered the power of plant-based nutrition myself, and was introduced by Dr. Joel Furman. Just happened to be like clicking through television stations one night, and he was on PBS talking about reversing type 2 diabetes with a plant-based diet. And at that point in my career, I was actually like thinking about doing something else, because I was working in long-term care, and it was also a facility where people came for rehab after having surgery, maybe. So there were a wide variety of patients, many of whom had diabetes. And what I had been taught to, in my training and my education, things like oh, eat chicken instead of, beef, drink skim milk instead of whole milk. Like what I had learned was not improving anyone's blood sugar, right? Or like counting carbohydrates, like limiting the amount of carbs at a meal. Like I was really confused and not sure, that I was effective as a dietitian. Like I have always believed in the power of food, and I'm so grateful that I, learned from Dr. Furman and then so many others, because that just sent me down a rabbit hole of learning all the science that I hadn't been introduced to in, my education and training. And so just to let you know that, like, while I think more plant-based nutrition is being taught in schools, and maybe back then, when I was in my early 20s and not really sure what I wanted to do with my life, maybe I wasn't listening either. I don't know. Maybe it was a combination of things, but certainly it wasn't emphasized. And had I known the power, like, I just feel like I could have helped so many more people, but now I know it. And I absolutely love what I do. And yeah, as Terry said, like, it's just amazing to be able to help people reduce medications, get off them completely. And probably what I love even more than that is just, all of the amazing benefits that you don't read about in research studies, like people having more confidence, people saying to me, people look at me differently now. I feel like I'm seen. I feel like I'm heard. I have so much more joy in my life. Just really incredible from, making lifestyle changes. So super rewarding. And so now, I'm here to share that, yes, plants are almost enough. And we're going to talk about nutrients of concern, like specifically, if you're on a plant-based diet or thinking about adopting it, like what comes up for people when they think about making that change. And then, what foods provide those nutrients. And I'll even give you some examples of just like simple everyday meals and how you can meet nutrient needs eating nothing but plants. So to start, and feel free, like, this is super low key, like feel free at any time to come off mute. I'll try to keep an eye on the chat box, but Terry, if you want to help me with that, that'd be great. Or, just feel free to ask questions as I go or save them till the end. We can also talk through if there's time. I know Terry had mentioned holiday tips. I was hoping that could just be more of a conversation. If you have questions or challenges, that we can just talk through them together as a group. So to start, the world's largest organization of food and nutrition professionals, which is the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, states that, plant-based diets are absolutely nutritionally adequate for people of all ages. And many other evidence-based organizations like the American College of Lifestyle Medicine, the American College of Cardiology, the American Institute for Cancer Research, American Diabetes Association, the list goes on, also recognize and support the use of plant-based nutrition. All right, so that said, I'm curious for those of you who are already eating a plant-based diet, or if you're thinking about it, you're curious, what questions about nutrients do you have, and or like what have people said to you when you said I eat a plant-based diet? What comes up? Yes, I see. Okay. Deborah said iodine. Mary Beth said, what amount of protein per day? Oh, do you recommend? So protein, calcium. Okay. So we're going to talk about calcium.
People ask about B12.
Okay. B12. Yep. We'll cover that. People need to eat meat. I see a comment about zinc and selenium. Yeah, great. All good points. So I was going to start with one that is probably the one that I hear most often, and that is, where do you get your protein? All the time that comes up. And, inevitably, it's the first question people have asked me when I, tell them I eat a plant-based diet, or when I suggest adopting a plant-based eating pattern. And the easy answer is it's all over your plate. Literally, you can't get away from it. So the better question is, where don't you get your protein? So that's right, protein is in all whole plant foods. They also contain carbohydrates and fats. And even foods that we don't think of as containing protein, right? Like your fruits have protein. So even a baked potato, right? What you might think of as carbs, all carbs, right? Actually has about 7.5 grams of protein. And that's more protein than you'd find in a large egg. And that potato, or the grains on this plate, or vegetables or legumes, all come packaged with a wide variety of vitamins and minerals and all the fiber and antioxidants compared to animal sources of protein, right? That don't have any fiber. And let's go on. So another thing I think is maybe something to just consider is like, well, what the heck is protein, right? Like, it's kind of ingrained in our culture that it's important, and it is, and that we need a lot. And often people aren't sure, like, well, how much do I need? It just seems like more is better. But what is it? So protein is simply amino acids that are strung together. So if you have ever played with Legos or any kind of building blocks, think of amino acids as the different shapes or colors of the building blocks or Legos, right? So each different shape is a different amino acid. And then you can use those blocks or Legos and combine the different shapes and colors in all different kinds of ways. And that's what proteins are. They're just chains of amino acids that are then folded upon each other. Our bodies have millions of proteins that are all made of 20 amino acids, 9 of which are essential. So in nutrition, essential means that we have to get those from our food. And the other 11 are non-essential, meaning our bodies can synthesize them. So what synthesizes those 9 essential amino acids? Any guesses? Feel free to come off mute or type in the chat box. No guesses? All right, I'll tell you. Plants, just plants and fungi synthesize those 9 essential amino acids. So any animal that humans consume, thinking it's so rich in protein, also has to get those 9 essential amino acids from plants that it consumes. And protein requirements for healthy people, if you take your weight in pounds and multiply it by 0.36, that will be the recommended dietary allowance of protein for you. If you have some weight that you'd like to lose, there's something called an ideal body weight that you can use to calculate an appropriate amount of protein. On average, women need around 46 grams, most women. And this will vary based a little bit on activity level. And men need around 56 grams. And again, also your height. So people who are taller need a little bit more protein. And protein in everyday food. So, right, that amount of protein, if we go back around 50 grams, 50 to 60 grams for most people is all that's needed in a day. So another way to think about this, I'm someone who I don't love going around calculating, calories or the grams of protein I'm eating all day. It just kind of overwhelms me. But to think of it as in a percentage of calories, that all we need is to get 10% of our calories from protein. That when you look at whole plant foods, almost all of them just fall within that guideline, right? So fruits are going to have less protein, but your vegetables, your whole grains, legumes, nuts and seeds, which nuts and seeds have a little bit more, soy has a little bit more protein, and your legumes, right? But most of them, like, you don't have to do any calculating. It's just like, and if you're eating a variety of these foods throughout the day, like, I hope I'm putting minds to ease if you were worried about protein, that it really is not difficult to get protein needs met on a plant-based diet. And, you know, look at all the other added benefits of eating these foods. They are naturally low in fat, with the exception of nuts and seeds. They have zero cholesterol. They're high in fiber, which is so important for good health compared to animal sources of protein, which, right, when I mentioned earlier that we often think like more must be better, not the case. So when protein is coming from animal foods, of course, that's associated with an increased risk of a lot of various chronic health diseases like heart disease, and even all-cause mortality. So just another way to think about this, if you had 2,000 calories of broccoli, which is a whole lot of broccoli, like 20 pounds of broccoli, and not sure anyone could eat that much in a day or even a week, but that would give you 146 grams of protein. Lentils, 157. So when we're looking at like as a percentage of calories, these foods have a lot of their calories coming from protein for sure. And again, even foods like potatoes that we think of as, you know, carbs, or that's commonly what I hear, contain protein. So all whole plant foods have a combination of protein, carbohydrates, and fat. And some of your higher protein plant foods, soy, all your beans, lentils, peas, those legumes, right? Nuts and seeds do offer some, and they vary. You know, many of them have a much greater portion of their calories coming from fat, but seeds in particular tend to offer a little bit more protein than nuts. Okay, so wanted to just give some examples here, like simple foods, right? Oatmeal, berries, right? Like even if you're looking at having a banana and berries with your oatmeal in the morning, as an example, that fruit still adds, you know, a little more than 2 grams of protein to your breakfast meal. And just wanted to give some examples of how the protein that you consume throughout the day really, you know, does add up. And this isn't including, you know, any snacks that you might eat. And obviously, if you had to consume a little bit more than this, you could certainly just bump up the portion sizes of some of these foods. You could, you know, add in a salad with your dinner meal, or maybe throw some lentils in the sauce, but pretty, you know, modest portions of things, and protein needs easily met. And, you know, way more than that 10% of calories coming from protein, more like 18, mostly because the mushrooms really kind of increased that percent of calories coming from protein. All right, so moving on, what do you think our next nutrient is going to be? Some of you had mentioned in the chat box you hoped it would be covered. Exactly, calcium, Deborah, I love it. Right, so if you grew up, you know, hearing the same things as I did, it's, you know, I very much learned that I had to drink milk with my meals, that it was necessary for me to, you know, have strong bones and teeth, and it was this great source of calcium. And so where does the calcium in the cow's milk come from? Right, it comes from all of those leafy greens that she's eating, which of course, you know, the cows that are now used, you know, on factory farms are obviously not out in fields grazing and eating grass anymore either. But calcium in any mammal's milk comes from what the mother eats. And so it's not like cows are unique or they have, they're like making calcium, and that it's necessary that we consume the milk from a cow to obtain it. And in fact, there's not evidence to support those claims of the dairy industry that drinking cow's milk or consuming dairy foods is necessary for strong bones. The risk of osteoporosis, the risk of hip fracture certainly does not decrease with the consumption of dairy foods. It's actually the opposite. All right, so how much calcium do we need? Here you go. You can read this chart here. For most people, it's 1,000 milligrams, women over 50, 1,200 milligrams, men 70 plus years, 1,200 milligrams. And green leafy vegetables and beans are really good sources of calcium, especially green leafy vegetables. And the absorption of calcium from green leafy vegetables is twice as good as the absorption from milk. So we absorb the calcium in plants much better than we absorb the calcium in dairy foods. And those plant foods come packed, especially the greens, come packed with vitamin K, potassium, and magnesium, which are all very important in bone health. So you get, the added benefits of all of those other wonderful nutrients being present, as well as lots of fiber. There are also fortified foods, things like fortified plant milks, for example. If you're concerned that you might not be getting your nutrient needs met, or maybe you're not eating that many greens and beans, or maybe you're using into a plant-based diet, many of the plant milks are fortified with calcium, and you can just do some comparison to see, if that's an option for you to work in more calcium, what brands, might work for you. Some of them aren't fortified at all. Let me just check. Oh, Deborah, is that a cup of cooked greens? Let me go back to the slide. Mustard greens, milligrams per cup. That is in a cup of cooked greens. Oh, and I forgot to mention the Swiss chard and spinach. You see that they have the asterisk that not much of the calcium is absorbed from them. Anyone know why?
Oxalic acid.
Yeah, you got that right. Yeah, they're high in oxalates, which inhibits that absorption of calcium. So certainly very healthy foods, and if you love them, eat them. Just don't rely on them. If you're eating spinach thinking that it's giving you a good amount of calcium, you're not going to absorb much from it. So adding in other greens would be my suggestion. Yeah, collard greens are wonderful. And iron. All right. So there are two forms of iron. One is called heme iron. That's found in animal foods, meat, poultry, fish. It's easily absorbed. Non-heme iron, which is found in plant and animal foods, is really interesting in that your body absorbs more when stores are low. And non-heme iron is it makes up about 60% of the iron in meat, poultry, and fish. The other 40% is that heme iron. And on average, vegetarians have lower iron stores than meat eaters, but this might actually be beneficial because the heme iron in meat has been associated with an increased risk of type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, cancer, and mortality. And so relying on plants, that have that non-heme iron And again, right, it comes, the foods that are rich in iron come packed full of so many other vitamins, minerals, fiber, and antioxidants. Might actually be a really good, not might, actually is a very good thing, and way to get your iron needs met. So here are the amounts of iron, the recommended dietary allowances. And let's see if there's anything I'm missing. During pregnancy, the RDA increases to 27 milligrams per day. So that's important to know, that it's really important for women who are pregnant to be focusing more on iron-rich foods, or perhaps using a supplement. So here again, just a list of some foods that are rich in iron. I'll let you take a look at that. And ways to enhance iron absorption. So you'll notice, let me go back, right? Lots of beans, lentils, molasses. Not sure if anyone uses that, but that is a good source of iron. And the grape nut cereal, I put that on, that's fortified with iron, and many of your dry cereals are. And I put that on, I think I have teenagers at home, 2 teenage daughters, and one is very active and doesn't have much time to eat during her day. Like some of these nutrients, I do worry about her consuming and just like enough food in the day to get all of her needs met. So sometimes those, the cereals that she enjoys get like, just kind of give some added benefit in that they are fortified with some of these nutrients, and are ways in which I think she might be able to get a little bit more. So eating iron-rich foods with vitamin C-rich foods is really, really important, because the vitamin C helps your body absorb the iron. So the benefit, again, of eating plant-based foods is that so many of them, if you're eating fruits and vegetables, you're going to be getting vitamin C. But in particular, bell peppers, strawberries, citrus, greens, right? So you can greens have the iron, and they also have that vitamin C. So right there, they're a wonderful option for getting iron, for sure. And then avoiding tea and coffee, red wine and cocoa within an hour of meals, because those can inhibit the absorption of iron. Is herbal tea okay to eat? It depends on the type. And there's a resource, and then also to avoid calcium supplements at meals, which inhibits iron absorption. So Mary Beth, you asked a question about herbal tea. It depends on the type of tea. And there's a resource at the end that I'm gonna, suggest people go to if you have more questions, if I'm not able to answer everything this evening. That is just a wonderful place to go for, it's vegannutrition.org, for looking up specific nutrients, and even, if you're considering taking a supplement, it's a great place to get more information and just to educate yourself to make an informed decision. So if we use the exact same foods that I used earlier for, showing you how plants are rich in protein, I just wanted to show that you can also, get calcium and iron from those exact same foods, right? So iron needs are met with those exact same foods. If you look at calcium, it's a little bit low. And one thing to think about with nutrients is you don't necessarily have to get 100% of the RDA every single day. That RDA is calculated to make sure that most of the population's needs are met. And for many, it might be an overestimate. So we'll talk through some ways that you might kind of even start to pay attention and know areas in which you might make improvements. But I wouldn't be concerned seeing that 716 milligrams of calcium if on other days, you know, I'm getting closer or someone is getting closer to that RDA. And right, you might add, I just wanted to point out, like just adding 2 cups of cooked kale is going to provide another, you know, 350 milligrams of calcium or iron. Eating an orange, maybe you have that for a snack, right? So just giving some examples of how you could boost up that calcium intake pretty easily. And then vitamin B12. So this is one that vitamin B12 is not, you know, made by plants. And it is really important for people on a plant-based diet to make sure that they're getting adequate B12. And even for people who aren't on a plant-based diet and who are over the age of 50, it's recommended to take a B12 supplement. So B12 is produced by bacteria and other single-celled organisms that live in dirt. And it's in the small intestines of animals. And right, so when people eat animals, cows, pigs, chickens, the B12 is in their bloodstreams, and you get some B12 with those foods. What's interesting is ruminant animals like cows make that vitamin B12. Chickens, their feed is now fortified. Like a lot of animals that people consume for food, their feed, because they're not, you know, out in their natural environment eating a natural diet to them. So what they consume is fortified with vitamin B12 and other vitamins. So essentially, you know, people are getting B12 in a supplement that way. If they're eating animals, the animals are being supplemented. And it's, as I said, recommended for everyone over the age of 50, regardless of your dietary pattern. And that's something I find most people never hear. Also, people who have a history of gastric bypass surgery should be supplementing with vitamin B12, and it's really important for nerve and blood health. And the RDA is really small. It's just 2.4 micrograms per day, but we don't absorb it from supplements very well. And a supplement is just something that's really easy and inexpensive. It's just a very good way to make sure that you're getting your B12 needs met. And for most people, 100 micrograms daily is adequate, but you can check with your healthcare provider. It is recommended that people who are over the age of 65 take 1,000 micrograms of vitamin B12 daily. Someone mentioned iodine earlier, and with salt being iodized, that's one way that it's helped many people get their iodine needs met. And it is really important for thyroid health. We can get iodine. It's rich in sea vegetables. It comes from the ocean. So the richest sources are different types of seaweed. Kelp, however, is so high in iodine that it can exceed the upper tolerable limit. But nori, which is used to make vegan sushi, tends to have modest levels. Wakame, which is often the type used in seaweed salad, is also a good choice, as is dulse. And just having, you know, any of those types of seaweeds a few times a week is good to give you an adequate amount of iodine if you're, you know, especially if you don't want to use salt. If you are using a little bit of salt on your meals, opt for the iodized salt, like the sea salts, the Himalayan salt. They are not iodized. All right. And vitamin D isn't actually a vitamin at all. It's actually a prohormone, and it is hard to get from foods. You know, we do make vitamin D from sunlight exposure. And, you know, a concern there is that obviously for some people, the risk of sunlight exposure outweighs, the benefit of their bodies making the vitamin D. And they might put sunscreen on, which is going to block that vitamin D production. And also, depending on your age and where you live, the color of your skin, that is also going to make a difference in how much vitamin D you produce. But typically, just 10 minutes a day in the sunshine with like your face and arms exposed is enough for people to make adequate vitamin D. And obviously, like in the winter months, where you might live, where I live for sure, right? It's dark for a good portion of the day. And even just because of the northern latitude, sunlight exposure alone might not be enough in the winter months. So veganhealth.org, I'm not sure, I might have said the wrong name when I mentioned it, but this is the website that's just a really, really wonderful place to go if you have questions about specific nutrients or wondering about supplement use. You can get a lot of good evidence-based information there. And then the National Institutes of Health Office of Dietary Supplements. And I'll forward all of these slides to Terry so that he can share them with you. And PCRM is just a wonderful place to go for information. So they also have a lot about specific nutrients. And they also offer a lot of events for continued learning and education. So I just wanted to share that they currently have a free online class series. It's called Fight Diabetes with Food. And that meets every Tuesday at 3 p.m. Eastern. It's a webinar and it's just recurrent. Although I believe that once the current series ends, they're going to take a little bit of break to get through the holidays and then start back up again in February. But it's a free program. And if you can't attend all of the sessions, but you register for them, you get emailed the recordings. And then starting in January, there's going to be a plant-based weight loss program. And all of this can be found on the PCRM website. But just wanted to give you a couple of options for continued, education and support. So let me stop sharing my screen and just take a look at the chat box, or feel free to come off mute and let me know what questions you have.
Karen, thanks so much. I just also jump on as far as PCRM is concerned. The Exam Room podcast is something, do you know how often they do that? But I know it's almost every day, I think. You can go to YouTube and type in Exam Room, PCRM Exam Room podcast. That's excellent. It has on a lot of the doctors and nutritionists from PCRM and guests that will come in and address a lot of topics. So PCRM is an outstanding resource. I did see a question in here too, but and then after I ask this, then other people can jump on. It was back near the beginning. Do you have any concerns about a gastric bypass patient adopting a whole food plant-based diet?
No, I think it's a wonderful thing. And Chuck Carroll, who's the host of the Exam Room podcast, he's also known as the weight loss champion. He had gastric bypass surgery and, credits that surgery for about 10% of his weight loss. Chuck used to be over 400 pounds, I believe, and he's 5'6", and he's now, he's lost, I'm trying to think, I don't know, well over 200 pounds. He's under 200 pounds now for sure at his height. And he eats a fully plant-based diet and says that is what, really set him up for success. And also really helped him get a hold on food addiction. and just really change, how he thinks about food, which is so important. I'm also a health coach, and just the whole idea of behavior change is I love, and I really think that, how we feed our body, it also obviously impacts the cravings that we have, but can reset, our taste buds. It totally sends different messages from our gut to our brain. And so on so many levels, adopting a plant-based diet can be, he's now 155. Thank you for that. And for posting his website, it's awesome. But yeah, I mean, he's just one person in particular who's had great success on a plant-based diet. And, when you have gastric bypass surgery, depending on the type, if your stomach is so much smaller and you can only fit so much in it, really learning the foods that are going to give you the most nutrients, and being able to utilize the nutrition in foods and not just think of them as calories, right? But like, let's really work in as much nutritional value from the foods versus just thinking of them as calories, if that is helpful.
Is there a link, Karen, or can you post a link for the diabetes virtual class?
Yeah, sure. Pull that up.
Let's see. And there's a question here from Terry. Could you talk about raw salad greens, iceberg, romaine, escarole, arugula, etc.? Are some empty of nutrients except fiber, as their mother taught them? What about unknown nutrients delivered in a whole veg form as opposed to fortifying with highly processed supplements? So I guess there are two questions there.
Yeah. All right. Give me 1 second. I'm not a good multitasker. Let me post this. Let me post this link real quick. There we go. All right.
Thanks.
Yeah, sure thing. So, okay. So 2 parts to that question, and you want to know if like romaine and iceberg have, yes, they do have, they absolutely have nutrients. Iceberg lettuce, has this really high water content. It might not be as nutrient dense as some other greens. Romaine lettuce certainly is rich in nutrients. All of your green leafies are packed full of nutrients, antioxidants, and because they also have that high fiber and not so much high fiber, I want to say high water content, that makes them exceptionally low in calorie density, right? So I always like to use the example, the big containers of greens that you can get at most grocery stores now, like the rectangular containers, they're plastic. They're usually about a pound. I guess you can get smaller amounts, but if you look at one in the store and just find one that's a pound, if you sat down and ate that entire pound of leafy greens, it's a little bit over 100 calories. That's it. And I would challenge any of you to sit down and eat that in one sitting. I know a lot of the plant-based stocks and, people out there encourage everyone to eat really massive salads, but I don't know that I've ever been able to just make one salad from that entire pound. It's a lot. So those leafy greens pack in so many nutrients for very few calories.
And a lot of fiber. And the other question was,
the supplements, right? Yeah. So no, relying on foods for nutrients as much as possible. Obviously the B12 is a different story. And for many, it's just a lot easier to get B12 from a supplement versus having to calculate how much you're getting from nutritional yeast or whatever. And the other thing is that the supplement industry is very highly unregulated, and you don't, what is listed on the label as ingredients isn't necessarily what you're getting. And so just being really careful in choosing supplements and getting one that has been tested by a third party to me is important because they are so unregulated. And when tests are run of supplements, they do find heavy metals and other contaminants. And so having that third-party testing, like the USP, for example, which stands for United States Pharmacopoeia, is a third party. And if they test supplements, their seal, that USP, will be on the supplement label. And that ensures that that product has been tested, that the ingredients that are listed are what the product contains. And they also test for harmful levels of a number of contaminants as well.
Great. I mean, there are a number of questions here, so I'll call it kind of rapid fire these. And if we can maybe be a 30-second response to try and get as much in before 7:30 here. So one is, what do you think of vegetable juicing?
Well, what do you miss when you juice things?
What's that?
I said, what do you miss out when you juice things? Fiber. Robin, I saw your lips move. I read your lips. Yeah, exactly. All the fiber is extracted, and the fiber is just so important. It's what feeds all the great bacteria in your gut. And I also say it depends. It depends on the individual. Juice might play a role in, some people's diet, and for some people it might not. And also just keep in mind, it's also really, really calorie dense, right? So it depends on what you're trying to achieve. For some people it might be helpful if they need to gain weight, but yeah, it depends on the person, but you do miss out on that fiber.
Here's a question. What is bok choy in terms of calcium? And I think you had that on one of your slides. It was way up there.
Yeah, it's very high. So one thing that I have found really helpful, I have an app on my phone called Chronometer, and I wanted to mention this and I forgot. So Chronometer is just a database. Like, it's a way that you can put in what you eat in a day. It's very accurate, and it also lists like every nutrient. Like, some of the other things that people use aren't as comprehensive as Chronometer. But it's really cool because you can go in and just see where you are in terms of your diet and how it's meeting your nutrient needs. And it's not something I recommend that you do forever, right? But it can be a helpful tool just to see, like, I don't know, am I meeting my calcium needs? Check it out and see where you fall.
Are most plant foods anti-inflammatory, or are there some foods to avoid?
Well, I'd say that also depends on the person. For most people, I'd say a good strategy for good health and for optimal gut health is to, right, you want to get a high fiber diet, so eating a lot of plant foods and having a diversity in your diet. So getting at least 30 different plant foods a week. And that includes not just fruits and vegetables, but like the different legumes, the different whole grains, herbs, and spices. But that has been shown to be really helpful for diversifying what lives in your large intestine, like having a good variety of those probiotic bacteria. And right, so are some foods inflammatory? Well, it depends on the person. Some people find that certain foods, cause inflammation in one way or another. And is it that food that's the issue, or is it that there's some type of dysbiosis or imbalance in the gut? And that maybe in time, when things improve, maybe test it again and see if you're able to eat that food and feel okay. But certainly, there are some people who know they feel better if they avoid certain foods. Obviously, if you have an allergy, that should be avoided. But no, I can't say that there are certain foods that are off limits for everyone.
And in general, you can kind of say that plant-based foods are much less inflammatory than animal-based foods.
Oh my goodness, absolutely. Yeah, the way in which they impact your gut, and the microbes that make compounds based on what you're feeding them, right? If you're eating fiber, that's what feeds the good bacteria, and they produce anti-inflammatory compounds for sure. And inflammation is reduced in a number of other ways when you eat plant foods too.
Here's another question, and I think this was somewhat covered. How do you feel about fortified nutrients versus natural sources? And is there a difference in absorption? I'm not sure you talked about the difference in absorption.
Yeah, usually you, it might depend. And I would say I would have to go and look. Like, I don't keep all of this stuff stored in my head, but a lot of times you're going to absorb the nutrients from food better than you would from supplements. And, you know, fortified foods, as I said, like, they can offer benefit to people who might struggle to get in enough food. Like, there are people I talk to who have a hard time eating the amount of calories or the amount of plants that they need to meet their needs. And so sometimes those fortified foods are really helpful to them. And at least the fortified foods are still providing, right? They're not just taking like a bunch of different supplements. The foods, which tend to have, you know, lower amounts of the nutrients compared to like a supplement pill, are still also providing a lot of nutrients in the whole form as well, or in a less processed form. Your opinion on sugar substitutes, especially stevia, is it better to avoid them? It depends. That's my answer to so many things. Like, what's your relationship like with stevia? I'd want to know. Because for some people, like a little bit of a sugar substitute on their oatmeal in the morning, or like some really awesome whole plant foods, is going to really help them increase their consumption of the whole plant foods. And for some people, they know that if they have artificial sweeteners or sugar in any form, that it really triggers a response in them to just crave more sugar and to want more. So it's kind of about knowing yourself and understanding like what your goals are and how these different things impact you. But you know, if it's small amount, yeah, it's like how much, how often, but certainly it could fit into a healthy dietary pattern.
I tell you, the raisins on oatmeal has taken the place over time for me. So
Yeah.
what are your
And
thoughts?
you might make those like stepwise, right? Like, we can always do better, always. It's like we're always evolving. So you might have some stevia and like in time find like, oh yeah, like the raisins I love mashed banana and frozen cherries in my oatmeal. Like, you might find things to substitute, and right, like it's a process.
Here's a question about what are your thoughts about EPA DHA supplementation?
Yeah, that's I feel like there's obviously the omega-3 fats are really important, and I would suggest that people consume like chia seeds, flax seeds, hemp seeds, walnuts. Those are really great plant sources of those omega-3 fats, and certainly don't come packaged with the pollutants that, you know, fish do. And 2 tablespoons a day of any of those seeds or the walnuts, you know, should be adequate for most people. If you go to veganhealth.org, they have an awesome article on omega-3 fats. Some people might need more than that. And, you know, everyone, I think, should read like get the best evidence and then make an informed decision that's going to work for you.
Let's see, do you recommend any particular supplement company in regard to B12?
No, if you want to like even just Googling, like if you also want your B12, not all supplements are vegan, right? So if that's important to you, to just Google vegan B12. Like I also found one that's combined with vitamin D, like it's a vegan supplement. I think it's kind of made like geared towards people who are vegan, so that you have, if vitamin D is something that you also want to supplement with, but you can obviously take vitamin B12 on its own. But I would just make the recommendation to look for one that has been third-party tested. And if vegan is important to you, you know, Google vegan B12, and there are a variety of companies that come up.
There's something called, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing this correctly, but is Vasepa, which is a prescription grade, I guess, omega-3, and it's only EPA. Do you know if that's good for health?
I don't know. Does anyone?
I'm not familiar with that myself.
Yeah, so hi, it's Josh. Vasepa is, yeah, it's a prescription grade EPA. It's been shown in at least one really large, well-done study to reduce the risk of heart attack in patients with a history of heart disease or diabetes, to reduce the risk of repeat heart attack by 25%. So it's pretty powerful. It is a marine source, so it's not plant-based omega-3 fatty acids, you know, and anybody who's, you know, anti-oil or tries to be oil-free, of course, you wouldn't want to be taking fish oil separately, but certainly if your doctor recommends it, it's beneficial.
Thanks a lot, Josh. Fresh versus frozen veggies and fruits.
Frozen can work wonderfully, right? They're frozen shortly after they're picked and retain their nutrients. The plants retain their nutrients. So depending on, you know, how long fresh produce has been in transit and sitting, the frozen might actually, you know, be higher in some nutrients than fresh.
Karen, I think we bumped right up to that 7:30 time, so this worked out really well. I'd say, just as a reminder, everybody, if you'd like to receive notice of upcoming, PB Now events, and you're not currently on our list, you can register at pbnow.org by clicking on the Learn More button and putting your information in. I'd like to thank Dr. Lieberman and Amberly for sharing their time with us tonight. And thank you, Karen, for your excellent presentation and for answering all those questions.
My pleasure. Oh, it's been a lot of fun. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Have a happy holiday season and look forward to, hope you can come to the next meeting, everybody. Bye-bye.